Thank you for that reminder. So I was saying, that the next thing you need to do is to clarify your message, get the summary of your message. So for instance, if they're giving you like a data to work with, that everything is just jumbled up in maybe an Excel sheet or something, you need to be able to ascertain what is the end goal of this data set. Is it that the whole message I'm trying to pass is that we generated 500,000 naira at the end of March? So by the time you've identified that, then in terms of when you're now designing, in terms of your hierarchy, you know that this is going to be the main focus. All right. So by the time you are done with that step, next thing is to now plan the structure and the layout of your design. Okay, so there's obviously going to be different structures and different layouts when it comes to designing. Okay, so if you're trying to do a design that involves statistics, that is different data and all of that, you know that you're going to be making use of charts because you can easily convey that message without having to put too much text. So if it's a statistical data, you need to be able to make use of charts, bar graphs, all of those things, so because they can easily convey your message without having to put too much text. Now, the goal of every design is that it needs to be as simple as possible and pass the message as efficiently or as effective as possible. Designing is not all about putting a lot of data on one sheet because honestly, nobody has time to read through a design. They're just going to see what they see first, right? So you need to be able to ascertain the layout or the structure of your design. So for statistical data, you make use of graphs, you make use of charts. Then the next thing is if you are trying to show a process, then you know that, oh, I'm doing this step by step, then you are going to highlight the steps. And if you are trying to do a comparison, like maybe if you're trying to make a comparison, then you know that you're going to use a design that shows before and after or pros and cons, like I don't know if you've seen designs where you have here we have 2 pages. So the first page would be like the before, then second page after you get. So you need to be able to know what you're designing, then you use that to plan your structure and the layout of your design. And then the next step is to now do your design prototype. So that's where Canva comes in. Okay, so you can do designs with a lot of different tools, but we're doing Canva, right? So one of the major reasons that a lot of us use Canva is obviously because of the templates. So you might not have time because you're not a designer, okay? It's just like an added skill to what you're doing. So you might not have time, or you might not even have the skill set or the knowledge to start designing from scratch. That is why you need Canva, okay? So remember I said you need to be able to identify what you're designing for. So if you're designing for statistics, when you go to Canva, obviously you're going to be searching for graphs, you're going to be searching for summary, quarterly reports, all of that. So you see a lot of templates there, and you need to pick your templates according to what you're designing for. Okay, so this is the 4th step. And then finally, you have to review your design. Check what exactly the message or your design is passing. So one way I'll always advise you to review your designs is to show your design to someone, right? And just tell them to tell you the first thing they see when they look at the design. Like that's the first thing ever they see when they look at the design. Whatever they see, if that isn't the main message you're trying to pass with the design, then it means that your design has not communicated its message effectively. It needs to, so that's where hierarchy comes in. You need to be able to put your design details in hierarchy. So for instance, if you are trying to say, oh, we made 500K at the end of March 2025, then you know that information, wherever it is going to be on your design, it needs to be in a bold, you need to use a bold font for it, and the font shouldn't be tiny. All right, so if it's something that you're putting on social media, you cannot prioritize your, So let's say you need to also add maybe your website, maybe like a call to action, you need to add your website or your social media handles in that design. So it's not going to be, obviously it's important because at the end of the day, people might want to go and search for the company or whoever you're designing for, right? But it's not as important as the heading or the message of that design. So that's where hierarchy comes in. So if you're using a font, if you're using fonts that is like, you're using size 8 for your heading, you're not going to make your website size 14, or you're not going to make your so if you're using like size 8 for your main message, maybe the message of the day is made 500K in March, you're not going to use size 8 for that, then you will now use size 14 for your maybe website or something that is not as important as that message. I hope you understand. So when it comes to reviewing your design, when you show someone to see it, whatever they see first, that is exactly what, if they see the main message first in that design, then it means that your design is up to par. But if not, then it means that you have to work on the hierarchy, you have to change some things and all of that. So like I mentioned previously, the main goal of doing a design is you are trying to sum up a message in a single sheet or in a single post, right? So you have to make it as simple as possible. Always avoid using a lot of text in your design. That's a lot of common mistakes that we see. A lot of times people use plenty of text in their design, hoping that, oh, and this message is important, this message is important, it needs to be here, it needs to be here. No, you need to prioritize the major message and try as much as possible to put it in that. You cannot put a lot of text on design. If you check, most of the designs that you find online that actually look really good are very simple designs, like very, very simple designs. So there's something they say when it comes to design, less is always more. So you have to use as little as possible text as possible, right? And then try and communicate everything else with images. All right. So this is the design thinking process. So just to reiterate, because I wasn't recording when I started, I said the first step is to understand your audience. Okay, who is going to see this information? If it's management level, keep it at summary, keep it at KPIs. If it's your colleague, make it as detailed as possible. If it's for the public, simplify it and just tailor it accordingly. Then the second is for you to clarify the message. What is the main goal of this design? Is it to show how much you made in March? You need to be able to identify it from that data or that sheet or wherever the data is from, and then make that the main goal of your design. Then I said the third thing is to plan the structure and the layout of the design. So depending on what you are designing for, if it's a statistical data, you need to use charts and graphs. If you are doing a comparison, you know that you're doing before and you're choosing a before and after template. If you are doing a process, maybe you want to highlight steps, then you need to search for a design template that shows step by step. All right. So then the fourth thing I mentioned is that then you now go ahead and choose the template. Okay, so based on the third step, so you choose a template and then finally you review your design. So this is after you're done with your whole design, and then you need feedback before you can send it or share it to whoever needs to be shared with. I hope you understand that part. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, so for the sake of this class, we're going to be using infographics, since that's what you guys mostly make use of. That's mostly what you guys design for. So we can use other examples, or I'm trying to personalize it according to what you guys do. Okay, so for the sake of this class, I'm going to be talking about infographics. That's going to be our case study, and that's what we're going to work on when I'm done. So what are infographics? Basically, an infographic is like a visual representation of data or processes or concepts. So anything that you're able to show in using pictures or using visuals is an infographic. Okay, so for social media, which I'm very conversant with, so sometimes when I want to share a message and I see that this message cannot necessarily fit into a single page design, what do? I make use of a carousel. So instead of having one design, I have 5 designs but in one post, and then I can slide through to see the details of what I'm trying to share. So for me, that's an example of an infographic. Okay. In your case, it can be when you're trying to share data and you're making use of a bar chart, or all of them is compressed into that single design. That's an infographic. Okay. So when can you use an infographic? So like I mentioned, on social media, making use of carousels. Okay, so if I decide to share a post that's a carousel, I've created an infographic. Most of the times, an infographic, like the name mentions, is to share information. Okay, so if you're trying to share information that you know that is complex, but you want to break it down, you can. That's what an infographic for. So when to use it some of the times is when you are sharing a post on social media, when you are sharing a report. So most offices they tell you to send your quarterly report. After 3 months, you need to share a report of what you've done so far, what you have achieved, and all of that stuff. So you can also make use of an infographic if you know that it's not going. If you don't want it to be too complex, you're trying to simplify it for whoever is going to receive that report, then you can make use of an infographic. And then for presentations, so sometimes you have meetings and you're trying to share ideas, or you're trying to present to a client or to your boss. So this is another where you need an infographic. And then for blogs and for flyers, so all of this for social media and for websites. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to talk about different types of infographics. I already made mention of that, but before I proceed, I just want to talk about some of the common mistakes that people make when designing infographics. So the first mistake is too much text. I think I've already said this before, too much text. Like, we don't want to see all that text. Like, it's usually not necessary. All it does is make your design look rowdy, and a rowdy design is not a good design. So when you are designing, always try and avoid having too much text on your design. It's really not needed. You might feel like, oh, you're missing out on some information that needs to be on the design, but there's always a way to summarize it. You can literally summarize anything. So find a way to always put it in bullet. That's why we have bullet points. Okay, so you can convey your message in the shortest text as possible. So the second thing is color contrast. Now, in the beginning of this class, our first class, I talked about the color theory, right? So that can also influence, but this is color contrast. What does color contrast means? For instance, so there's one mistake people make, putting white text on a yellow background, especially when the yellow background is very light. If you check now, right, if you try and put a white text on a yellow background, you see that the contrast is very, very poor. What do I mean? You can hardly see the text. So instead of using a white text on a yellow background, you need to use a black text on a yellow background. Okay, so that's where contrast comes in. So there are certain colors that you can't really, like for instance, sky blue and white. You can't use white text on a sky blue design. You need to make sure that your background is deep and then the text is brighter, or the background is bright and your text is darker. So color contrast is another, like, that is one thing that can actually make your design look very bad. Poor color contrast. Okay, it makes it hard to read. And then if you're designing for people that they even like have poor eyesight, it becomes a lot more difficult. So you need to also consider the set of people. And then using too many fonts or styles. So you need to be able to use 1, 2, highest 3 fonts. In fact, I would not even advise you using 3 fonts. At most, you use 2 fonts for your design. Okay, you can decide to use 1 font for your heading, and then the body of the design can now carry another font. Always avoid using multiple fonts in your design. 3 is too much. Okay, so use 1 or 2 fonts for your design. And then misaligned elements. So alignment is something that is very crucial in design. If your design is not aligning, even when you are making it as simple as a Word document, right? If your one text is like shifting out of a particular, it just looks off. Okay, so the same thing applies to designing. All right, so your text or your elements, whatever it is that your design comprises of, needs to be properly aligned. And then no clear flow of information. This is another common mistake. Now, this one is related to hierarchy that I talked about previously. So if you want, so your important message obviously has to be what is the most visible. So whatever message that is, let's say it comes like below certain information, then you have to use a smaller font size. So it's not, there's no clear flow. Like your eyes, when your eyes sees the design, like your eyes doesn't know where to be, or it's in the wrong place. So you need to be able to tailor it accordingly. So let's try and avoid these common mistakes when we're trying to design. Okay, so then I'm going to move over to the type. Before we get to practical aspects, I'm just going to talk about the types, and the design we're going to be using for this practical is charts. So types of infographics that we have are statistical infographics, process. I think I've even mentioned this before, timeline comparison, or then informational infographics. I don't want to dwell too much on this because we need more practical than theory. So these are just some of the types. And for practical, we're going to be talking about the statistical data. Okay, so before that, some of the design principles we need to consider, and which I will state while we work on the practical, is hierarchy. I already mentioned the most important info should stand out. Then I didn't mention balance and spacing. So when it seems like your network is poor, it's just I'm just seeing Nate on this call. Nate, can you hear me? You can respond on the chat box. Nate has also gone. Divine, can you hear me? Hello, Divine, can you hear me? Yeah. It seems like they have poor network on their end. Yeah. Keep going out and coming in. Hello, Divine, can you hear me? If you are speaking, I can't hear you. You need to unmute. Okay, Nate is back. Nate, can you hear me? Hello. What the hell? Hello?
Yes, we can still hear you. We can hear you, ma. Way back this end. Yes.
All right, great. I think you guys, your network is not very stable. Keep going out and in.
Yes, it's not stable, so it keeps logging us out.
Oh, sorry about that. But I hope you heard like the most of what I've been saying, Sha.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
I thank God for the record.
Yeah, thank God I'm recording this call. So, like I was saying, I was talking about design principles, right? I already made mention of hierarchy, always putting the most important information first, like making that stand out. Then balance and spacing. So avoid overcrowding your design. Always make use of your white space. Your white space are the empty spaces on your design. Okay. So there should be a lot of that. It keeps your design very simple and it looks clean. So then your color psychology. Remember, I already talked about how to make use of different colors for different designs before, because different colors communicate different emotions. So in your case, where you guys are mostly designing for professional courses, like things that you want to use professionally, most of the colors you're going to need to use will be like blue, white, green, till these colors that communicate, that give off a professional vibe. So those are the colors I am most likely going to be working with. So I'm not expecting to see colors like pink, colors like okay, so you can make use of purple as well. Colors like what other color? Yellow, but you can use yellow in some cases, right? So, but just make sure you pay attention to your color theory when you're designing. And then typography, I made mention of you using just 2 to 3 fonts. And then finally, there need to be consistency in your design. If you're using certain elements, it should be consistent with your design. Okay, so that was too much time. I'm just going to give an example so that I can explain what I need to communicate properly. So I'm about to share my screen now. Can you guys see my screen?
Can see it.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm getting a notification that the time for this meeting will soon elapse. So please, like we did last week, I was going to use Google Meet, but then I cannot easily record with my Google. So that's why I choose Zoom. But apparently we have not like we subscribed to Zoom. So the call is gonna end soon. Please just immediately join back with the same link. I'll be on the call. Then so okay, let me suggest this. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example, right? So let's say, for instance, you have a data that you're working with. Sorry, give me a sec. Let me minimize this. Yeah, so let's say this is the data that you're working with, a monthly, maybe you want to give a report, a quarterly report for the year. So how can you put this information or this data conveniently into a design or into an infographics? Okay, so sometimes you might be required to send in things like this, but sometimes when you are presenting, you cannot put this in a presentation slide because it's too much. How will you efficiently present this? It's going to be difficult. So that's where using an infographic comes in. Okay, so when you come to Canva, the first thing you can do, since it's a quarterly report, you need to also pay attention to your prompts. What are the things that I can search? I can give you the results that you want. So since we're trying to make a report, you can search for quarterly data reports. And you see a lot of reports. So you need to make use of the one that conveniently communicates to you. Remember, I mentioned that if you're doing a statistical report, then you need to look for bars, bar graphs, and all of that. So let's see. Sorry, give me a moment. I want to make things faster, so I'm trying to look for that. Okay, so let's make use of this one, for instance. So can now come and customize the template. So one thing about these graphs, or one thing about Canva that some people don't know, is that you can directly import your data into Canva without having to even start designing from scratch. Okay, so this data that I already have here, I converted it to an Excel sheet. So you can put your data in an Excel sheet and import it directly to Canva. So so when you want to communicate your information, all you need to do is, as long as you've selected the template that you need, the next thing you need to do is just import. Okay, so how do you import? Double click. By the time you double click on this graph, on this chart, this is a chart. Okay, by the time you double click on this chart, you're going to see a bar like this come up. So what this does is you can be able to customize the data that is here. Whatever you edit here is going to reflect here. So this week one, if I should customize it, for instance, it's going to change here. Okay. So you don't need to do all of that manually if you already have your data. So you can just work smart. Instead of coming here to start doing plenty of things, just import your data directly. And that's why we have this button here. Okay, so like I said, I already downloaded my data into an Excel sheet format, and I can now import it directly. So just click on import data. If it's in your Google Sheets, you can select. If it's elsewhere, you can select it, but mine is on my system, so I can upload my data directly. So I'll just go to my downloads. The information I showed you here, that's what is also on this Excel sheet. So by the time you open it up, just select done, and the data has been put here. So it's just as simple as that. So you don't need to start manually inputting your data, or where you need to put all of each. You don't need to go through all of that. You can just import your data directly. So you've been able to communicate effectively what this job says. So obviously the highest sales you made in January was from the north, which is 80,000. Then the highest here was from the north as well, and however it is. So this call is going to end in less than a minute. So can we just log off for a bit, and then I'll continue when we come back in, because I don't want it to just cut us off abruptly. I already got the notification. So it might take a minute to save the recording that I already did. So it might take a minute, but just stay on the call. I will come back on the call. So sorry for the inconvenience.